But I also haven't seen how a lot of people throwing away their faith has helped them. I've seen them to be more anxious, less focused, more prone to seeking out distraction and disillusion. And so I continue to be a promoter of the Christian faith for the betterment of people, because I think it helps people live better, happier, more purposeful lives.
Well,
and
that's the argument for the 14-year-old kid, the young man coming into manhood. Like, the competition between the faith and the rest and secularity is FOMO. Like, why should I be going to church and living clean when I could be out banging all these ladies programmed by Set? Because that sounds like a lot of fun, and I'm going to miss out if I go to church. And nobody seems to care if they crawl into video games and the population 1 VR.
I wouldn't say nobody seems to care. Nobody's a pretty big group.
Well, they don't advertise it. The marketing for the people who care about what happens to our children seems real bad.
Yeah. But there certainly are people who care. He had lived a rough life, and he had gone into a coma, and God came to him in the coma and basically said, it's time to clean up your act. So he came out of the coma and shows up at my church one day, throws himself headlong into every Bible study, every service. Older African American, always came, would come dressed for church, had a relationship with 2 or 3 women that he had to kind of sort out, and really enjoyed him for about a year. And then he had another major stroke, and that finally put him under. So, but that was the story of my father's ministry too. People will live certain ways, and then maybe towards the end of their life, they kind of realize they're facing the end. They pull their shit together. They clean up their room, and they'll have a season of joy, but they'll wrestle with, and when this guy died, there's a lot of conflict between the various women who he had various children with, and then other ones showed up at the funeral, and gosh, what a mess. But he had a good year at the end when he could come to terms with a lot of the things that he had done in his life and straighten himself out and get to do some things for his kids and leave them a little bit of wisdom and go out with some dignity. So yeah, there are wins.
This means that the individual psyche is far from being safely synthesized. On the contrary, it threatens to fragment only too easily under the onslaught of unchecked emotions. While this situation is familiar to us from the studies of anthropologists, it is not so irrelevant to our own advanced civilization as it might seem. We too can become dissociated and lose our identity. We can be possessed and altered by moods, or become unreasonable and unable to recall important facts about ourselves or others, so that people ask, "What the devil has gotten into you?" We talk about being able to control ourselves, but self-control is a rare and remarkable virtue. But so the intention is like this will be. I'll cut this part off and leave it as a video.
Remember, embody. I gotta get some of Grizz's branding in here.
We want what's best for you. Remember, there is no agency. And also, remember, embody. Remember to embody.
This vague accent that Grimm has, maybe he's been sent from Russia to America to colonize me personally. Maybe Grimm Grizz is Putin's tool to get under my skin. And now that he's become my favorite YouTube channel, it's happening.
Just how many times she had been married. She was an accomplished woman.
An accomplished woman. That's
Great
what you call
saint.
that?
Life, life is hard. People mess up. And what the church can be is a place where people can honestly be real and maybe help each other along and have Jesus help get them through here. That's what the church can be.
Well, Paul, I want to thank you for your time and attention. And I want to wish the best to your congregation, your shadow congregation, and your missionary work. Thank you.
Grit.
And now, this program is brought to you by...
Glass TV on here. Why would we need a TV? A darn TV. Why on earth would you put a TV in here? A darn TV. Why on earth would you put a TV in here? Why would we need a TV? A darn TV. A darn TV. A darn TV. Why on earth would you put a TV in here? Glass TV on here. Why would we need a TV? Why on earth? A darn TV. Why on earth would you put a TV in here?
Welcome to the Secret Chord. I want you to recognize Satanic Inversion Stream. Aha! I'm Grim Grizz, and you guys need some savings throws. They're against the mind control, in case you didn't know. You get to get one just by choosing. As long as you choose, you get a savings throw. You choose between survival, social, wisdom, or heart. Heart as the basis for your savings throw against the mind control. I roll these dice. If the one you chose comes up over 10 on the die, then you've made your savings throw and take half damage from the mind control. Otherwise, it's like normal and you're always taking full damage. Survival, social, wisdom, or heart. Choose. Ooh, survival, out the box and on the floor. All right, socialists, that's a 14 for you. You're going to be fine. Lovers of wisdom, though, you might struggle with this one. That's a 4. That's a 4. Hard, folks. With the 16 indigo kids. Ooh, Baker's Coven for you. And, hey, it's an 18 now, survival, folks. Congratulations. Hey, did you know for only like $2.99 you can get the digital version of the Writers of Meaning anthology on Community over on that Amazon? Check out where else to get it at writersofmeaning.com. Special thanks to the Shadow Cabal. So say we all.
I think so. I think secularism is another one of these products of modernity. Secularism comes from liberalism. Liberalism comes from Enlightenment rationalism. That comes from a certain type of Protestantism. Add that to fossil fuels, the scientific revolution, etc. You get a very culturally contingent thing, which really comes from the West.
Slime! What? It's a river of slime!
World, and calls itself secularism, and for a time lives on this fantasy, and I think it is a fantasy, that you can somehow create a rationalist public space where people can be religious or not be religious. It's entirely up to them. I grew up believing religion would fade away because that's what we all thought. I mean, I'm 50 now. I'm just over 50, and that was what our generation thought. Religion will fade away because it's nonsense. It was just stories people told before they had science. We don't need it anymore. So there's still a few religious people down in the poor bits of the world, but the richer they get, the more religious they'll stop being. There are more religious people in the world today than there was when I was born. Atheism and secularism are a tiny proportion of the planet, and they exist in this very, very modern, quote, developed part of the world where, as you say, people have stopped having children. We're also very clearly in a a place of cultural disintegration. We're rejecting all of our ancestral stories. We are confused about our gender. We are having an endless ongoing culture war. We don't function as a culture anymore. We're ripping ourselves apart for whatever reason.
Whoop! Hey, on God, good to see you. You're alive. You exist. Isn't that wonderful? Like, of all the realities you could have existed in, you picked mine.
It appears the assassins have failed.
There is no agency. We want what's best.
Welcome. See, the most of this thumbnail is a big shout out to President Foxman, who is kicked out another banger, currently sitting at 3.3 thousand views. Can you beat Fallout at New Vegas as a Marxist? Here's some of that now.
Reasoning I've heard is very much in the same vein as was stated before. These parents had a difficulty finding a way to instill the very ethical structure that they themselves had been instilled by when they were in church. Even though they struggle with the physical truth claims of religious traditions, they recognize the unique benefits that no other system has provided. This is a vast oversight that I see in Marxism. I was almost entirely unfamiliar with the concept of dialectics before I started this project, and I was pleasantly surprised. However, I think my mind relates much more to the Hegelian conception as opposed to Marx's. Dialectics gives us an understanding that often issues are not simply black and white, right and wrong. In processing the differences between the two sides, we find out what is common, and even in the differences, we find what is true in both. This is where I have trouble with understanding Marx. He will set up the proletariat and the bourgeoisie as a dialectic, but it's not clear to me how this is ever resolved. I will be willing to accept that this may be due to my own ignorance. Although with this, I see that Marx points to power struggles as the fundamental conflict, but that's just not how I see the world. There is an enchantment to the world beyond the bland gray of power struggle. It gives a flattening effect onto all that it is applied. While it makes it easy to digest, it loses all resolution. I revel in the human complexity.
What makes you assume that I'm not about to feed you all to the crocodile? What makes you assume that I'm not about to feed you all to the crocodile? What makes you assume that I'm not about to feed you all to the crocodile?
That's very exciting.
Hello. I see the assassins have failed.
Didn't naturally unmute. Sometimes it does. Sometimes it does. The agency deck card of the show is the Ace of Hearts. Oh, wait, no. It's... Oh. That. You know what? You can have two. You can have these two. These two for you guys. I like you that much. Because Yawn God gets his own, right?
It's a spiritual position. It's a stance you take. It's an orientation in the world against anything considered normal, anything considered legitimate. And what makes the teaching of this to children, I wanted to add to this. It's not just that kids are easier to brainwash, let's say. It's that the queer theorists are very specific that their program is abusive to children. They've got a program that's designed to pull social and emotional levers to make children accept this. So the person I was talking about earlier, Kevin Kumashiro, queer activist, he wrote a few papers that will just floor you. His paper Against Repetition was the reason I wrote this book. I read that paper and I said, okay, that's it. Now this is the book to write people have to know. He said that educators have a responsibility to pull children into crisis, a responsibility, so that that crisis can be resolved productively. And what he means by this, from within the context of queer theory, is that queer theory argues that kids want to be normal. Of course they do. And if they're desiring to be normal and to plug into a society that's working, a well-functioning society, then they can't experience the queer, the definition that we just discussed. They can't experience it if that's what they're desiring. So you need to interrupt that desire to fit in with something. And that something is crisis. What he says is, one of the ways you do this is you explain to kids that they may hold racist beliefs that they weren't aware of. You might hold homophobic beliefs that you weren't aware of. And then you've got this special knowledge that's coming from the queer theorist about all of the isms and phobias that no one can perceive but them, just like a cult guru or a cult leader. They've got this Gnostic insight, this special knowledge that you need to be initiated into. And they drive cognitive.
We all know that there is no agency. Any living gent can see doing what is right for me. Is lifting up my bro so he can grow some eyes to see that doing what is right for me increases all our agency.
And so, if you want to know, the Blue Church card of the show is coming right up. But I want you to consider for a moment that we know that there once was a time the evil wizard types or the sorcerer druid fellows, and those guys made their magic wands out of Hollywood. And we know that out of Hollywood came this film, The Matrix, which had a Trinity and the one spelled funny, and a Zion that was just a big orgy. And then, and in that thing, that if we recognize that it might be, hey, the Blue Church Joker made an appearance. That's interesting. We recognize that they might be that it might be a satanic inversion, and if so, you look at it and you think, well, they had it set up that the architect had this guy named the Agent who could come and possess anybody at any time and mess with our heroes. But maybe that's the inversion. What? Yes.
What I know now is that they, first of all, were not approaching things in this way, but the fallen angels employed technology to manipulate and harvest energy from humanity. This harvesting I've spoke of in great detail, but they feed on our fear, our low frequency. They feed on our suffering. And if they can take the light of God, which we are, and take its nature, which is love and unity and not selfishness, and bring it into a vessel of their tampering creation, slightly altered based on original creation, and into a reality that is being altered by technology as well. And if their, as false creator gods, creation can lure that light into the proclivity of sin, they get the energy that they want. It's like making Christ's light forget what it is. And that's the battle. That's the demonic battle. They are saying to God, I can make your children forget you. Watch. And largely, many of us are forgetting God. Many of us are incarnating in these bodies, uncertain if it was organic and God's will, or whether technology brought us into that, which I've discussed in my Moon Matrix videos. And we are then led into this meandering maze whereby we can go against our very core nature of Christ, and we can change into their rebellious nature, into the sin nature, from spirit to flesh, as Jesus called it. This is the battle. This is what they are trying to attain with us.
Is everything all right in here?
Yes, Nanny.
I love this guy because he gave me the basic notion that maybe if you clean your antenna, you can hear God better. But he's going off the rails again. And this angelic races that are assisting humanity. But the nice part, because the fucking photons, man, the electrons and the photons, that's just crazy shit. But he does make the point that we are subjecting ourselves unto false mediated light that's set to a certain frequency. And we know that those terrible evil Rockefeller childrens or whatever set the music frequency from the one, like the 432 to 440, one of those two. One's good, and then they made it 440, and it sucks for everybody on the vibrational level that no one understands. Similarly, all of these devices are mediated at a frequency that's not the natural sunlight frequency, and maybe besides the vitamin D it gives you, God might be sending you messages on sunbeams.
The list?
Yes, any of the first level ones.
I'm gonna get a soda. Anyone want one? Hey, Graham, I'm not in the room, right?
What room?
I want to cast magic missile. A room where he's casting all these spells from.
He hasn't cast anything yet.
I am, though, if you'd listen. I'm casting magic missile.
Why are you casting magic missile? There's nothing to attack here.
I'm attacking the darkness.
You know, there's this question of evil. If there was a big loving God, how come there's evil in this universe? Because you're his Sardaukar on the planet and you're sitting there playing video games instead of rescuing people that are being murdered and tortured and having their adrenochrome drank. And Deuce of Heart is the casino deck card of the show. Yes, all right. I hope you've had a wonderful time. You are the light in the darkness. Don't go out.
Keep it going. Never know. I'll never die. I love you. Please don't take my sunshine away.
my escape from getting kicked out of bullied and just having other friends that wanted to like go kill a dragon and take its gold. Go slay your dragon. That's also about the time that, you know, I know this is going to be shocking, but we become aware of this psychologist from Canada who's standing up to things and like speaking out about forced speech and, you know, taking a stance. And
bonus! This stream is back-ended by a cow production because, like, she's the only other person I know communicating on this play video games while you listen to stuff metric that Foxman is doing so well, and so I enjoy this.
I don't know. I think James Patterson. No, that's the book I had. Jordan Pender. No, Peterson.
Never heard of him.
So, you know, I'm like, whatever. He seems interesting. I want to look through his books. Like, why not? That seems like where you would approach someone who has published works if you want to find out more about their ideas. So I pick up Maps of Meaning from the library because I'm kind of a library guy, and go through it. And a bit of a weird synchronicity. So Peterson's big into Carl Jung, and a little known video game series that I've been heavily influenced by, Shin Megami Tensei Persona. They stopped the first part. They're now just calling it the Persona series. Often plays a lot with Jungian themes of the self and the shadow, and a bit of tarot stuff as well, which I find hilarious that when Nate finally started up a YouTube channel, like the first thing he went into was like meditations on the tarot, but refuses to listen to me about my weird video game shit. I don't know. Video games are too low class for him. He needs books. Well, just kind of really enjoyed that, but really like seeing someone who had in many ways been a canary in the coal mine type figure. We've got, this growing malaise that I've been feeling like with Gamergate and like some of the fallout from that, like in the video game sphere, like that was kind of ground zero for where the culture war would start. And, that was, tried to ignore it at first, like, hey, they're just going to be upset about some things, but then, like, everything will blow over. And then we'll just go back to, like, playing games and having fun and, like, living our lives. And, no, okay, we're not doing that. No, okay, I guess we don't do that anymore. And like, just kind of following some of his, like, concerns about how society has failed young men, and like, wow, this guy gets it. I understand what you're saying. It's like you're talking to me. And he goes through his thing, but I'm still not really like convinced that it's like the left is a lost cause, because I do still care deeply about how our modern consumerist capitalism culture is really hurting people. Like the whole atomization of the family and like individualism really didn't work with me. And kind of part of my deconstruction, if you can deconstruct from nothing, in the early 2000s was in reaction to 9/11 and our wars. I very rapidly jumped onto the new atheist mode. I was like, yeah, religion's fucking stupid. Like, what? All it's going to do is make you, like, kill yourself to get virgins and, lead crusades and finish your daddy's war. And, because it doesn't help when you have someone like Bush as the exemplar of what religiosity is, and like showing that whole, I guess, whatever that movement was called, the evangelical something. So I would sign me up with the Four Horsemen, Dawkins, Hitchens, those other two that I can't, Harris, the other one. Either way, I jumped in with that and was like, this is just rationally how everything works. It all makes sense. We're just, vestigial religion that, doesn't do anything for us. It was good once, like it kept us from killing each other, but now it's served its purpose. Let's move on to this new enlightened, rational materialism, which obviously led to the nihilism that I think really kind of consumed my darker days. And at some point, like, that nihilism went from a consumptive thing to like this realization that if there is no meaning, like if there's no great meaning to everything, there's no grand narrative, there's no purpose, I'm actually free. Like, I don't have to participate in this thing that I don't feel, that seems to just be throwing me aside and not caring about me. I can have whatever meaning I want. And that sort of freedom was a pretty big part of like realigning myself sort of, I don't want to say away from video games because I still play like 10 hours a day, but letting me better choose where to put my attention rather than feeling like there's specific ways that it needs to be done. And, you know, if there is some sort of creator behind it all, then they set up a crappy game, and I will make sure to include that in my, you know, QA ticket when I'm done. Like, I really leaned into like the absurdist aspect of nihilism, like much more of like the Camus sort of school than like a Nietzschean sort of nihilist. But Nate, that jerk, stumbled into something during the pandemic where I finally found the true freedom that I've always wanted, to stay at home and never have to go out into public or deal with people. Those year and a half, those 2 weeks that turned into a year and a half, 2 years, best 2 weeks of my life. Just got to sit at home, be with my family, occasionally interact with people that I actually like rather than the public. Introvert's dream. But, you know, obviously, I'm not a normal person. This is going to be surprising. It wasn't actually ADHD. Apparently, in the 90s, they like to diagnose ADHD in autism as well. And, boy, you know, hyper left brain dominance, autism. My main symptoms actually involve sensory issues with repetitive sounds and light fluctuations, and then, you know, obviously some of the social signaling I don't really pick up that well on. So when the pandemic came about, I finally got to realize what had been making me so anxious every day out in public, because without all of the stimuli from the office, from the drive into work, like all of those things that had constantly been putting me like just in this anxiety rage box, I didn't have to do that every day anymore. We're still primarily remotely working, and now when I go in to do things as like one-off like big meetings or conferences, stuff like that for work, it's unique enough to hit the curiosity as opposed to the like social dread. Mm-hmm. Like talking with you through the camera, it's a little awkward because like there's the visual element and like thinking, my voice, what am I doing with my voice? Yeah, what's my face doing? Who am I? It's just kind of been pretty challenging to, be like, I know who I am and what I've become, like, throughout the changing of the time.
Tyrant. But he stumbles into a dragon's lair and sees all this gold there, and sees this beautiful gold armband, and he puts it on his arm, and it turns him into a dragon. The dragon takes over his body. So for much of the movie, he's this dragon, but he doesn't want to be a dragon. He wants to go back to being a boy. And the way that he ultimately becomes not a dragon anymore is that he's trying to pull away this dragon skin, and then Aslan, who represents Christ, comes near to him, and Aslan starts helping him to separate it. But of course it hurts. Having this stuff pulled off really hurts, right? But then when he's finally freed from it, then of course he's a boy again, and he's a completely changed boy. He's not the same at all, because all the stuff that didn't belong, all that dragon that was in him got peeled away, right? So that's the contrast for me between the mercy, the gathering in, the openness, the care, the listening, the attending, the seeing, the gathering. That's all on the mercy side. And then on the judgment side is the measuring, even taking apart, reducing things down to the parts and then putting them back together again. I think Jonathan used the word decomposition at one point. Yeah. And then I think also in that category goes discerning and identifying and meaning.
Yeah.
Because in the conversation between Tammy and Mathieu, this clip.
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah, I think that was the part that interested me too.
So you see, the story of the flood is kind of the opposite of the story of Adam naming the animals. So you have Adam that names the animals. So that's an example of giving meaning to factuality, or giving meaning to what is. And then with the flood, you have the opposite. So you have the identity of beings are falling apart, and there's confusion, like there's hybridity between animals. So this is in tradition, but these are very well established tradition that before the flood there were a mixture of animals. They started to create hybrids of different animals. But this is important. It means something very, very significant. It means the identity of beings were getting confused. So that's why I said it's the opposite of Adam naming the animals. Because Adam, when he names the animals, that's what he's doing. He's giving a clear identity to beings. But then in the flood, this identity is being confused, like they're being mixed together. And then what Noah does, the flood, the idea that there's water covering the earth, that is what it represents. It represents a confusion between, it's not just confusion in the sense that we don't know something. It's also like a fluidity of things. Things change always. The definition of things start to change in a way where there's nothing stable and there's nothing fixed, and things get mixed up together. So that's what the water between heaven and earth represents.
I think I'm going to stop there because I wanted to ask you about something and what he said there. So he's talking.
Hello, everybody. This is Karen at the Meaning Code, where we explore the structures of the universe to discover the metaphors that uncover the hidden reality.
Talking about naming things, identifying things, which I would put over in this category of discerning, and of what I'm thinking about is when Jordan Peterson talks about these people who aren't differentiated, they're so agreeable that they never develop a personality or an individuality, and they kind of walk around in the fog. And I think that's connected with this flood thing, with not naming.
Yeah,
not
no, I
being
think
willing to particularize your life, not being willing to say who you are because you're afraid you might be wrong. And I wonder if you could say something about that from a therapist perspective.
Well, yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense because, you know, it's very easy to be confused if you don't have. I mean, a lot of this kind of thing would go back to, were your parents able to help you develop yourself in a proper manner, which means, and this, you know, you see these same patterns over and over again, which means help you deal with the reality of you know, the world and its limitations in society, and being able to operate in it properly in the set patterns, the set social patterns, teach you the social patterns. At the same time, allow you to, like you were saying, have your own individual, like we have this, you know, biological framework that's very similar, but how that framework, you know, populates with experience is going to be quite different for all of us. So to allow that difference that your inclinations are going towards to develop too within, you know, within the parameters of certain frameworks. So you aren't just sort of, you know, a wash in a way. And there's a couple of things I think that can happen. One is, you know, one is like overbearing parenting, which, you know, tries to enforce the parent's personality on the kid. And the other is way too lenient, so you don't, you know, that structure doesn't develop properly. So one or the other could result in what you're talking about, I think. Like one is you haven't learned to differentiate yourself because you haven't been allowed to, because of, you know, the draconian parental style, or you don't have enough structure, and so you're sort of, you know, washing an anything goes type of mentality. And you know what's funny is a lot of times kids who are raised in a too lenient environment become quite rigid as an antidote later.
So what's reality? I don't know. When my bird was looking at my computer monitor, I thought, that bird has no idea what he's looking at. And yet, what does the bird do? Does he panic? No, he can't really panic. He just does the best he can. Is he able to live in a world where he's so ignorant? Well, he doesn't really have a choice. The bird's okay, even though he doesn't understand the world. You're that bird looking at the monitor, and you're thinking to yourself, I can figure this out. Maybe you have some bird ideas.
So I think what he's talking about is somehow not being, I mean, it could be either one, like somehow not being grounded in the correct patterns, the correct, which Mathieu talks about a lot, the correct, you know, structure. And another is having it so structured that you're not able to learn how to you know, navigate it yourself. But whatever the case, the thing that stands out to me, of course, is that you know, that relationship between the two, which scales up and down in every regard, which is why
relationship between
the structure and the openness.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So the structure needs to update, like he's saying, you know, like these structures will update, but if they're allowed to update too much without any grounding, then you get what this water represents.
Yeah, so that fits right in. See, lately, I've been trying to read a lot of scientific papers. It's a challenge because I don't have the background, but
I hear you.
Michael Levin put on Twitter yesterday a paper that he and a guy in quantum physics named Chris Fields, and then Carl Friston, who's also, I think, a cognitive neuroscientist. The three of them published this paper together. And the basic idea of the paper, if I get it correctly, is that way down to the level of quantum mechanics, the same thing is happening all the way down through all the levels.
Yeah.
That, and this goes to information theory, and it goes to thermodynamics and all of these kinds of things. That the environment impacts the system, and the system impacts the environment.
Yeah, totally makes sense.
Right?
Yeah.
So I put on, I responded to him on Twitter, and I tweeted out, and I said, okay, here's the quote. And it basically, that's what it said. It was a quote from his paper. And then I said, then does this mean that it's turtles all the way up as well? And he came back and he said, bingo. So apparently I found the kernel in that paper. and then he said, I will have more on this next month. We're working on it.
Oh, that's good.
But if it's turtles all the way up, then, you know, like Glenn says, that would be a very good case for strong emergence. And strong emergence is that there has to be an emanation as well as an emergence. It can't just be emergence from the bottom up, right? And so then that gets back to your idea of quality.
Yeah, and quality, spirit in the Peugeot metaphysics, it's kind of the same thing. You know, you're infused with this greater idea, let's say, you know, that an idea is spirit, and how you manifest that is matter. Let's say you're inspired to make a painting, you manifest it with oil paints and canvas. You know, it's the meeting of spirit and matter. And back to the attention thing, I think what he's, you know, it's like, where do you put your attention? Do you put it on something good, or do you put it on something lesser? So if you're doing a painting, there's a pure attention that's directed. You could be painting something for someone else, right? You have a commission, and this is how you're going to make your living, and they want this. So that's your attention is here. But if you're, you know, really involved in the dynamic experience of self-expression, that's in a way a higher purpose. There's nothing impeding your expression in that. There's no person telling you what to do, and there's no paycheck at the end of it. You know, you're taking your own inspiration. That's where your attention is, versus over here what the client wants.
Yeah, and it's a completely different experience.
Yeah,
I've done a few commissions, and man, it's hard. It's a lot harder than and it's hard for so many reasons, because like you say, your attention is drawn aside. And
it's drawn aside. It's drawn to partial, not the full. Because I mean, if you're taking whatever this inspiration is, whatever this quality is within you that you want to express, and you don't know what it is really, you know, a lot of times it has to sort of be in relationship with your artist materials.
Well, so let me throw something out for you. In this conversation I had with Brad the other day, which hasn't published yet, it'll publish next month. He was talking about agape as the, in some ways, agape is the ultimate observer. If you think of it as turtles all the way up, the very top would be agape, would be because God is love. That's the equal sign.
Right. And so each turtle is sort of a fractal representation of this ultimate. Is that what he means?
Well, for example, if you have a system and an environment, a cell is a system, and it exists within an organ. The organ is the environment of the cell. So the organ is having some authority over the cell, and the cell is having some authority over the organ.
Supporting the organ.
And the organ is within the body. So the organ is the environment for the cell, but the body is the environment for the organ. And then the atmosphere around me, the heat or cold, or, you know, whatever kind of environment I'm in, or even the cultural environment that I'm in, is the environment for my system as a human person. And then the nation is the environment for, you know, my cultural environment, and the universe, you know. So there's environment all the way up, and each system becomes an environment as you move up.
Yeah.
And it goes all the way down as well. But to me, that seems to be analogous to the observer and the observed. The environment is the observer, and and the system is the observed. So then that means if it's turtles all the way up with the observer and the observed, then the ultimate at the top is still agape.
Mhm.
So when you're in relationship with somebody, if you are both looking through the lens of agape, if that agape coming down is the lens through which you see each other, then the relationship is going to be, more secure, and the proper balance of attention and discernment, or of care and of separation.
That's right.
Right? You're going to get the proper balance.
Yeah. That reminds me a lot of, what John wants Dialogos to be. Like guided by that, like ego out of it, at least not in the sense that someone wants to win or show off in the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Like you and I are talking, and we're trying to make sense of these things we're looking at.
Yeah.
And in order for me to convey to you what I'm trying to say, I have to say it in a, I have to get a sense of where, like, we kind of have to come together as where our attention is going.
Mm-hmm.
And get rid of the stuff, like clarifying would be getting rid of the stuff that doesn't serve that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so I mean, in terms of agape, I think that means that kind of approach that is open, like going along the quality track, let's say, like letting the conversation go where it feels like it's serving this thing that we're trying to, and we're not even defining it, the good, let's just say, or the good in context of this conversation, which is like you and I had a few things, we wanted to talk about, and just seeing how they come together and make sense of things. And that attitude we have, that open attitude, dynamic attitude, is agape. Is that
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that's one aspect of it. And another aspect of it is something else that Matthieu was talking about with Tammy. Let me see if I can find that as well.
When you engage your imagination, that's the chalkboard that God writes on. It's like the computer screen. It's the interface between us and God, and it's real. And it's powerful and significant. So learning to interpret that has been one of my goals, to better interpret what's going on inside of me spiritually, so that I can help myself and live better, and others, but mostly myself. Just because if I keep myself out of trouble, I'll behave with everyone else. So when I came into the realm of this little corner in everyone, it's so off the beaten path for me. I know there's something valuable here. Like, dude, if you want to heal the sick, cast out demons, and raise the dead, yeah, I'm your guy. As well as somebody else here. Like, you know what I mean? It's just like a skill set. Like, okay, fine. But I'm missing something. I feel it. There's something, like there's a dragon that sometimes I have to contend with. It comes from Tolkien. He goes, just because you talk to a dragon doesn't mean you should listen to it. And don't look into the eye. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's so brilliant. Instead of casting a demon out in the name, nothing wrong with that. But I'm getting more of a mental images and realms within my own mind to deal with these things as they come into my life. And as I gain different functionality, it's the best I can describe it, of my mind, it's helping my heart. Huge. And I'll be honest, like, I've changed a lot to get God, and it was him changing me, and it's worth it. And if I have to change again, fine. Don't care.
Sort of walked it backwards through the conversation. There were some other little interesting elements of it, but I remember my first watch of the conversation was Daniel Dennett sort of gave up the keys to the kingdom and didn't realize he was doing it. So, all right. We got a message in. So yeah, if there nobody wants to come in and talk about that, well, nobody wants to or nobody can. So, Dale's got ideas. So what do you think of the conversation, Dale?
Haven't even moved the screen over yet.
Dale's got ideas. Sorry, you got to mute your.
I got you.
All
Yeah,
right.
you didn't give me time. It was too quick. Anyway, I watched that video too, and two things really struck me. One, Jordan was on his sort of best behavior, respectful with Daniel.
Yes.
Okay? He was showing him a lot of deference. So he would throw out the question and then throw out another thing, but he never phrased anything as an argumentation type structure. It was always just a very polite question. The other thing that struck me is that anybody who's been listening to you and Jordan for quite a while could have just waxed the table with him instantly. I mean, he left hole after hole after hole of no foundational axiom support for all his arguments. Those are the two that just really jumped out at me on that video. It was like, man, this is like listening to a bad Sam Harris. So,
yeah. Alan, what do you think?
I only saw your recap of it, I mean, when figures like Dennett get flustered, and you see it all the time, you tweeted you mentioned his comment about, oh, in any civilized society, the trust, obviously we trust each other. Like, I'm not even saying like, oh, there's blood in the water, we can great way to, let's rip them to shreds. It's like, anytime someone learns the scientific method, be like, okay, you're reading a study. You didn't do the study. You're reading it. You have to trust this other person, even if it's someone commented under one of my comments. Oh, well, we have peer review. And they said it in a respectful way. But I'm just like, yeah, that's just more other people.
I can't do Alan. Here's Buddy. Night, buddy.